So wow, okay, that was like the best introduction I've ever received in Washington. As sort of a junior freshman senator, you usually just get to stand in way back and don't get such nice things said about you. But that means so much, especially coming from somebody, Ellen, who's the hero. It's sort of like Goliath, the giant, sort of giving some help to the leprechaun. So thank you for those kind words, and to all the CFED family. Just this is really an inspiring organization that pumps me up. Tremendous. You were actually generous because it's often not done, where they talk about the senator down here. But please let me tell you the not so well kept secret. Staff does everything. And I just want Charlotte to stand up and you guys just give her a little bit of a warning. So in my end of the year wrap up, I asked my staff, what can we be doing better around here? And then after all these serious policy things, they say, and we'd like you to bring coffee to the office more. So I brought coffee this morning. We were in a little morning gaggle, and she comes up to me and just says, look, I've raised $34,000 for Flint, Michigan. And here with a New Jersey senator, and I was just so proud that amidst all her work, she's really trying to raise money to support us because we're all in this together. And that's really the theme I want to hit on real quick, because as I came in here and heard a little bit of the Q&A, you guys just made all the points I was going to make in my speech, so we'll throw this thing out. But this is the point I really want to make, and maybe I can make it in two ways by telling a little bit of my background. First is that since I was a teenager, I've been working with young people in inner city communities. When I was out at Stanford, I worked at a summer program in East Menlo Park, sort of the East Palo Alto, really tough town, tough community, ironically separated by the tracks by one of the wealthiest communities. Again, a testimony to the most ridiculous housing policy this country has ever had, that has really cemented in inequality, inequity, bigotry, and some of the lesser streams of American culture. But as I worked with these kids at the end of a long summer, I was just really loved these children, and I decided to leave these. I was given boys ages 6 to 12, and I was trying to leave them with this inspiring message. And I was a football player at Stanford. Close your eyes and just envision me chiseled for a second. Now I just jiggle, but just please, for a second, imagine me back then and had a lush head of hair. And so I decided to try to inspire these kids with something I had heard in high school, which was this speaker who came to our high school students, and we were all sitting like you guys are, and we said, raise your hand as high as you can, and we all struggled to get our hands up as high as we could, and said, is it as high as you can? We said, yes. And he goes, now go 3 inches higher. And this, when we thought about it, when we had a goal, when we had a mission, we squeezed a little bit more. Some people just stood up and realized, hey, we can always do more. So gather these kids together to do the exact same thing. And I don't know how many people here work with kids on a regular basis, but I definitely do not have any advanced degrees in child psychology. All the kids just looked at me and basically said no, they said, oh, come on, man, it's late, it's tired. One kid, ever the enthusiast, raises his hand, and the other kids just jumped on him. Put your hand down, you got BO, man, so put it down. And so now I've decided that I have to resort to a base form of persuasion, very well known in the town of Washington, probably, and it was called bribery. And I pulled out $5 and said $5 to the kid that can raise his hand the highest. And the other thing, if you work with children, you know that in this country of ours, regardless of background, all children have a base capitalistic instinct inside of them. And so as soon as they saw, President Lincoln staring at them, they got all excited, and their mental calculus, risk reward went there, and all their hands shot up. And now I feel this sense of smug satisfaction. I have now, my will has basically overcome their will. I felt they're strong, and I looked at them, and then unfortunately I saw over to my left this little kid named Robert, still remember his name, cute as can be. He's like a cross between a young Gary Coleman and Emmanuel Lewis, just so cute. But yet he was just looked down and frustrated, his arms crossed, his face in a pout, and he was short. He could definitely not compete with all the other kids straining and putting their hands up for the $5. And so I was just going to walk over there and give him a little pity and sympathy. Hey, don't worry about it. This is just an exercise. And as soon as I started walking towards him, he turns around and little legs start motoring out of the gym. And I'm like, oh my God. And so I ran after him, and I caught him easily in 3 strides, and just picked this wiggling boy up. He's like, let me go. And I turn around and go, Robert, what's wrong? Where are you going? And he turns around, when I turn around, and he gives me this look that like with a wisdom that betrayed his age, and he said, let me go. And I said, why? He goes, you said you give $5 to the kid who could raise his hand the highest, right? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, let me go because I know a way to get to the roof. And I put this kid down and I gave him the $5. And so let me just tell you right now, I have learned in my life that the greatest natural resource this country has is the genius of its children, the genius of its people. And the irony is, in this country, and we know that, by the way, this is not anything debated in the halls of Congress. We know that in a global knowledge-based economy, the most valuable resource you have is the genius of your people, the preparation for them to compete. And Americans are pretty good in competing. I mean, we've shown this generation after generation, but the problem is we're falling behind. And how are we falling behind? Well, we're falling behind by locking more and more of our children relative to our competitors in poverty. And it's dramatic. You know, looking at 35 developed countries in the United States, this country, 35 developed countries, our competitors, the US had the second highest proportion of its children living in poverty. That's an astonishing number in and of itself. But when you begin to look at the differences of what the outcomes are for children in poverty, and on top of that, you realize that the kids that are in poverty are disproportionately minority in this country, you begin to understand that we are stacking the deck against what is in our self-interest. Because the more kids that succeed, the more we all succeed. And so these outcomes are outrageous. Look at this. Kids in poverty, child growing up in poverty in the United States is 1.3 times more likely to develop a learning or developmental disability, undermining their economic potential and their contributions to the whole. This is a stunning data point. A child who grows up in poverty in the US has a 9 in 100 chance of attaining a college degree. 9 in 100 chance. And again, we used to be the #1 country in the globe for graduating kids from college and percentage of population. We were #1. Those chants we do during the Olympics, we're #1. That was the case in kids going out of college. Well, now we're no longer there. We're out of the top 10. And too often, a child growing up in poverty will not have the same access to other issues that are critical. For example, nutrition and having a good, healthy mind. For example, environmental contaminants. Please understand, poor kids, the #1 reason why kids miss school in America is asthma. Yeah. Poor kids have dramatically higher rates of asthma than kids that are not poor because of poor housing. It goes on and on. Because of enormous pressures kids face at home, stressors, environmental stressors, emotional stressors of poverty, stressors, and there's a whole lot of childhood trauma and PTSD growing up in the inner city for anybody that, like me, that lives there. And so our kids will, because of these stressors, fall grades behind their equivalent peers in school. By the time a teenage girl is in poverty, she will more likely to have an unplanned pregnancy. They're more likely to be involved with the criminal justice system. All of these things happen dramatically, the difference between a kid being in poverty or out of poverty. And so that's what, to me, the urgency of this is. Because kids out of poverty are incredibly productive. Kids out of poverty are make incredible contributions. And so the question for me always been is, what are the levers we have to pull? Now, Ellen, for crying out loud, stole my punchline about the fact that this is the best anti-poverty program. So I'm gonna have to trump her by doing my first ever imitation in Washington, D.C. in public of another famous Washington, D.C. official. So it is 2006. I've just been elected to mayor of the city of Newark. I'm taking over a city that has an incredibly high poverty rate. Taking over a city that is financially bankrupt, taking over a city on the edge, and my voters did not tell me this, elected in 2006, they did not warn me that in 2 years we would fall into the worst economy in 70 years. I think the voters should have given me a heads up that I'd have to govern under those conditions. And so I get a call from a guy saying, come up to Chappaqua and sit down with me. And so next thing you know, I'm driving up as a mayor-elect to go meet with Bill Clinton. And I'm thinking, okay, this guy is probably just going to tell me some stories and so on and so forth. And so we get in, and first it's that he's showing me pictures on his wall, but then he sits down to me, pulls out data, and says to me, here goes now, this is being recorded, so I'm in trouble. This will live on YouTube forever. But he goes to me, Cory, I want to tell you right now that the best anti-poverty program that we came out of the federal government is the Earned Income Tax Credit. and thank you very much. One person. I've worked on that since 2006. 10 years of perfecting that. My staff now is hanging their head in shame. But then he started going through the data with me that unfortunately some of that data is still true. That not only is it the best way to get people out of poverty, but that we're leaving so much of that money on the table. Between 15 and 25%. In New Jersey, 20% of people that are eligible were leaving on the table. So he challenged me to set up free tax centers in Newark, and we did. Over a dozen EIT centers where people can get their taxes done. And for my almost 8 years as mayor, began to be the biggest exponent of getting more money. From our benchmark year, we more than doubled the amount of money we were getting in people's pockets. And the stories to me, every tax season, were blowing me away. I remember the White family lived in the South Ward of Newark, one of the poorer areas of our city. They were in financial distress. And we brought them not only out of poverty, but they got so many thousands of dollars back, because you can go back 3 years, that they were able to put a down payment on a home. They bought a 2-family home. So suddenly, instead of being renters in distress, they were owners renting, and suddenly they had financial stability and another source of income. Incredible stories like that of families just through this program making change. And so I became a believer and leaned in, and we did all kind of things through our work in Newark. We then realized that when people get $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 back, that we want to make sure that they leverage that money in every way possible. And so we created, thanks to a grant from some foundations, including Michael Bloomberg, who gave me my best political advice ever, which is before you become a mayor, Cory, you should become a billionaire. It's a brilliant political advice that I did not follow. But we created a savings match program to try to incentivize families to save that money. Because what we found out, and my staff and I are now working on with an incredible bipartisanship effort to try to find ways to incentivize through the EITC savings, is what we knew and we found out now is that most families who live on the financial margins cannot withstand a financial speed bump. Okay? Now, some of you all know exactly what I'm talking about. If I get a parking ticket, not that I have ever broken a parking law in my life. That was a joke for the camera. Booker lies. I think I broke some traffic infractions just walking here, I think, this morning. But for me, I'm going to pay the $100, $150, or $200. But for other folks, that financial speed bump now puts them in a bad situation where they're short on rent, where they can't buy food, where they're in peril. That's what we don't understand in our country, is how much of their margin. And then when you factor into that we have the most ridiculous, out of control criminal justice system, where 1 out of 3 Americans, adult Americans, has an arrest record, when municipalities are giving out fines and fees like crazy to try to make up on budgets that are fractured and broken and inadequate, you suddenly find a family that can get a $250 fine for something, can't pay it, then interest charges, and before you know it, they're losing their housing. They're losing their jobs because their car has been towed and they can't get it out. And so not having this cushion, this ability to withstand those financial speed bumps, often is the difference between homelessness and housing, feeding somebody and not having a job or not having a job. Savings is a powerful thing. And so one of the things we're trying to do right now, we're exploring with Moran, is can we do that, something like that, to improve the EITC? Now we have had this has been one of the best moments for me, because people didn't understand this, and I have a victory dance which will never be seen in public, but I was doing my victory dance because I knew that the gains that we made in the EITC through this omnibus would be transformative for a lot of families. The gains that we made from lowering the income threshold for the CTC, transformative for families across this country. A higher credit for families with 3 or more kids, transformative in terms of the doors it'll open. Getting the marriage penalty reduction permanent, incredible. These are incredible gains, worthy of all of us right now pausing, standing up, and doing our versions of our victory dances, because this is how much of a meaningful change it will make. But we gotta go further. We have got to go further. And this misunderstanding that so many people have, that somehow kids, and I call them kids, but they are working adults, 21, 22, 23, 24, that they're not out there in dire straits, disconnected youth in our country, with heavy burdens, that these childless adults don't deserve the same opportunity. I did a victory dance for our legislation, but a lot of things in there were hard to stomach, that we were giving massive tax breaks in that same omnibus to incredible large financial institutions, banks, corporations, which, hey, I'm not one of these people that wants to carry a pitchfork and go raid every corporation in this country. That's just not my style. But I do understand that when you look at what creates a strong middle class in this country, especially if you understand that middle class wages for this generation, first generation of Americans, not to do better than our parents, because middle class wages have been stagnant, that the gains in economic growth have gone disproportionately to the wealthiest in our country, that we've got to start understanding what are we going to do to create opportunity for the youngest Americans. Because when you give young Americans, when you give struggling Americans, when you give the bottom quartile of Americans, when you give poor Americans tax credits, when you give them resources, that's an immediate boon to the economy. The EITC alone in New Jersey pumped over $1 billion into the New Jersey economy, which has a multiplier effect creating jobs. So if you tell me we have $1 billion in tax credits to give, where is it going to do the most stimulative effect to our economy? Giving it to the top 5% or the bottom 5%? Clearly, it's the bottom 5%. It will have a multiplier effect because most of those folks who get that money are spending it on urgent needs for their family and putting it into our economy. And so for me, the fact that we had this great success, worthy of a victory dance, but we were still giving these massive tax breaks to the top 5% and not taking that last step, which we pushed for and fought for, which was to expand for childless Americans, the EITC. That to me is problematic. And so just to finish up here, we have work to do. We have work to do. This is, to me, an organization and a group of folks fighting every day in the trenches, not for poor people, fighting for America. Fighting to understand that for every one of the people in this country, when we do better, we all do better. Fighting so that we don't have this terrible distinction on the globe for being one of the wealthiest nations who does the least for poor children. Fighting to make sure that we live out our creed and our ideals as a nation. I am going to be pounding the gospel over the coming month or two, given a chance with a book to go on, to poke my head up. I've been keeping this low profile, trying to down here, but I'm going to go out charging over the next a month or two to talk about this ideal, which I think is an American ethic, which I think is one of the most important American values, this ideal of interdependency, that we need each other. We are each other's hope and bond. We are each other's promise and possibility. I love the ideals of America that I hear exalted all the time of self-reliance and rugged individualism. I am all for that. And my mom and dad raised me to say, you've got to take care of yourself. You've got to work hard, be disciplined. If you want extraordinary results, you've got to put in extraordinary effort. But they were never, ever shy in telling me that I am here because of the extraordinary commitments of millions of Americans, from people who marched for me in the civil rights movement, who didn't even imagine that one day they would be making an impact on generations yet unborn. People who fought for fair housing and helped my family buy a home in a town that would not, that whose real estate agents were intent on not selling to blacks. For people who fought in this city where my parents got their first jobs to get companies to hire African Americans. My parents told me I'm the result, the physical manifestation of a conspiracy of love. That rugged individualism and self-reliance are so important, but you know what? The old African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. Rugged individualism and self-reliance did not get us to the moon. It didn't map the human genome, didn't pave the road. That was done through interdependency, through us looking out for one another, for us understanding that we are stronger together. And that's what we have to get back to. The ideal set forth in the Declaration of Independence, that we pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. The work you all are doing is sacred work. It is honorable work. Understanding that this nation, it can't go fast in this economy, we're trying to, but we are on a mission to go far. And the only way to get there is together. Thank you very much.